Everyone seems to understand that the odds are, in some way, stacked against them. After all, there's that old phrase that no one gets out of life alive. But still, we have to face tomorrow's challenges. Well, that's the value of a hero story. They tell us that whatever it is, it can be done. Against all odds, victory can still be achieved. Still, we have to be careful that we don't get fixated on the story and forget the substance that made the story. On November 18th in 1952, a Navy pilot was pushed into a moment where he had to defend himself against overwhelming odds. 1 David against 7 Goliaths in an aerial knife fight that lasted 38 minutes. And he came out on top. But if you really want to get a handle on the moment, you need to know more about the man that made it. This is the story of Royce Williams, a child of the Great Depression. He's from a tiny prairie town in South Dakota, and yet he ended up in a proxy showdown between the world's greatest military powers.
When we got on top of the clouds, they were probably 50-some thousand feet and putting out contrails. And I saw them as they were closing on us. We were head on at each other. I called out tally-ho, meaning I see them. I prepared to fight 7 MiG-15s as they approached. And I said, do not engage. But I said, we are engaged. They are there, and I'm going to have to handle the situation. We lived right on the edge of town, and we had a large grove of trees next to it. I spent a lot of time over there just bird watching and so forth. But about 2 miles outside of town was a creek. But the big trick was when ice would break in the spring to see who's going to be the first one to go swimming. And I did not, but my brother did. And boy, not for long, and he came out shivering. Dumb, of course, but still talking about it. So it's those things that count, I guess. Yeah, I'd go out and get a couple of ducks before breakfast, go back and leave them with my mom and clean up a little bit and go to school.
How old were you then? How old was that?
Oh, I would guess 12, 13. Oh, actually, I was 11 when I first started driving. I think we had phones, and they were the kind you would ring, and you had so many rings, and that was for you. And so one of the cottages called down and talked to my Uncle Charlie, and he threw me the keys to the car, and he said, hey, Royce, Cottage 37 wants 50 pounds of ice. I said, yes, sir. He said, well, deliver it. I said, Charlie, I don't drive. He says, here, take the Chevy. So I went out and started it up and drove up to the ice house and uncovered from the straw and so forth that keeps it from melting, cleaned it up, put it in the trunk, and delivered it.
What did the Depression mean to you and your family?
My dad was a grocer, and all of his regular customers, we maintained a book on them. And everything they bought, we wrote down. Some of the families, the books grew, but no payments. One time he told me, Royce, he handed me, I think, about 5 of these bunches of books. He says, you can have anything you can get from it. He's just given up on it, and it's on him, on the house, and anything you can collect, you can have. It is going to come in, they're not likely.
So did you go out and collect bills?
I did not. I saw his wisdom and just went about doing what I was doing. Well, there was nothing to forgive for that guy. Yeah. I was at the University of Minnesota. I was majoring in geopolitics, so I was already beaming in on this. I said, holy mackerel, they're calling up the reserves, and here I'm a regular Navy guy, and I'm trained in all this and hot to trot, how come they're not sending me? And then not only that, we graduated, and then they sent to us postgraduate school. I said, there's a war on. And I was assigned to a Corsair squadron because I was qualified in Corsairs. But I came down and I saw those jets. And I'd like to fly that. I looked up to who the commanding officer was of the Panther squadron. And lo and behold, it was Stan Holm. Like, he was the executive officer of the ROTC unit at the University of Minnesota. So I gave him a call and I said, I'm scheduled to Red Squadron, but I'd sure like to get in yours and fly jets. He said, see what I can do. The next day I had new orders and I was in his squadron.
One MiG versus one Panther. Is that a fair fight?
If somebody has surprise, they've got an advantage. Depends on the situation, but if they're both up to fighting, the MiG has the advantage. I knew I was in their threat area, but when they broke up, I thought they might be going home and getting ready to land or something. So when they came in, invisibly, all shooting, it was a surprise. And immediately maneuvered and got in a good position for a short burst and shot down number 4. And he started smoking a little bit, but he dropped out of formation. And my wingman at that time directed all of his attention to that guy, left me, and followed number 4 down. Yeah, so there were 3 there, and that's where my attention is. And they zoom on up at a high rate of climb, and I tried following them best, but they were getting ready to re-attack, and meanwhile, these 3 are coming in from another direction. So I prepared to fight with checking my gun sight and testing my guns. And I didn't have any instructions about what to do, but I told them it's 7 MiG-15s as they approached and turned around right over me, heading back to the direction they came from. And they said, do not engage. So there were my instructions, I guess, but I said, we are engaged. There's no way I can duck out safely at this point. I mean, they are there, and I'm going to have to handle the situation. I've got my concentration on whatever is active at that time. In the meanwhile, they're swirling or whatever, gaining a position to take their turn. Lead aircraft has his wingman, and the guy that just lost his wingman went down and being followed by my wingman, went off to the left and probably 2,000 feet above and turned, and that's the one I was initially tracking, but he was in the sun when I saw the other 2 coming from a little farther over and different, and the lead aircraft started firing at me very soon after I moved over to track them. But he shot briefly and they were closing rapidly, and so I fired a short burst and he turned, and I noticed his wingman now was kind of closing on me. The other, I didn't keep track of him, but the other guy came in, and he's dead head on with me, and we're coming like this, and he's shooting. At this time, he's in range when I switched to him. And he's shooting and I'm shooting, and he suddenly just quit. And he kept coming, and I kept firing. And he slipped right underneath me with no maneuver at all. And in as much accounting for how many were lost, I have a feeling that he was dead. From then on, The other three are making their attack because they are positioning while these others are now having to regain a position on the altitude and position. So from then on it's one after time, and I'm just flying along, and we've got all these up here. And so I'm seeing this guy come at me, and he gets in, and I'm just turning as hard as I can into him to mess up his aiming and so forth. And he's shooting and shooting, and most of them, as a routine, regular, good fighter pilot maneuver, pulled on up to where I'm unable to track or anything, and he's just going up for another shot, and another guy's coming in. One of them made a mistake, and he came on in, and he's shooting at me like this, and he kind of ducked underneath me, and he made a turn at my altitude, and I was pretty close, and I fired on him, and a lot of pieces started coming off the airplane, and he was hit severely, and I had to maneuver hard to avoid hitting him. So at one point, a guy goes in, and he comes on by, and I get a lucky shot on him from a good angle off, and he starts slowing, and I come on around and continue firing, and I run out of ammunition. But he's now smoking and just dropping out. And I look on around, and here's another MiG, and he slipped on in while my attention's on this thing, and I'm straightening out a little too long, and I make a nice target for him, and he hits me with quite a good angle off and put a 37 round right into this part, and it went into the accessory section of the engine and really messed up my airplane, and I had difficulty with controls, out of ammunition, and he pulls in right behind me at an ideal probably 400 feet maybe, and he's just shooting away. And the only really operational, active, effective control I had was the elevator. The cables to control the rudder were shot away, and I could kick the pedals around, but they were disconnected. And the hydraulics for the aileron control were shot, and I had difficulty, and it was out of trim, and I was having to use both hands on the stick to maneuver. But he comes in and right behind, and luckily I'm aimed right at the task force, and we've got this big snowstorm in between at 12,000 feet down, so I'm diving for that on the way to the task force, and he's just sitting there shooting, and I'm pulling back on the stick and then just pulling it, shoving it forward, and I'm going like this, and he keeps shooting over the top of me, underneath of me, and so forth, and we both ended up in the clouds, and he probably lost sight of me, and my attention is now to the condition of the airplane. Should I eject? No, I wouldn't survive it. I'm too far from the task force for any rescue, and my time of survivability and the conditions of the cold water and so forth, I wouldn't have made it. So I said, best stick with it and see how it comes out. I got so low under the clouds, I didn't have the capability for the systems at that time to eject safely, so I'm stuck in the airplane. I could, of course, crash landed in the water, which isn't 100% survivability, but who knows. My problem is, how do I get this thing back on the aircraft carrier? Two hands on the stick, and all this time I was at full throttle and probably using a lot of fuel, but I never checked on fuel. I just didn't have time to put my attention there. I put my landing gear down and my tail hook all by gravity because I didn't have the hydraulics, and I'm testing to see at what point would I stall, and at 170 knots was the point. Anything below there and I was losing control. I'm back here and the ship is over there, so I'm flying, but I can't maneuver the airplane to come over and line up with the deck into the wind. But I could I keep going at the ship. So I'm notifying the landing signal officer that I can't line up. He said, "We'll cut you for an early wire." The ship's here and the wire, so like I'd probably go like that and right over the side. I might have caught a wire and hang, but not likely at 170 knots. So I was coming in hot, off center, looking bad, and the captain of the ship kicks it around and lines it up with me, and bingo, I land and catch number 3 wire, just like it was meant to be. "50 years plus had transpired, and the story itself of the encounter was out there, but the truth of the matter remained hidden until I was notified that it was no longer classified. So I told my wife, and she said, "Oh, Royce."
You've lived a charmed life.
I have. No denial.
Why do you think you've lived such a charmed life?
Well, if it gets down to that, I am religious, and Jesus Christ is my Savior, and I think He puts people on earth with a purpose, and evidently I had one to serve, and I gave it my best. No. I always withhold it. I should do better, but as good as I did, I've gotten away with it.
Wow. What do you think your purpose is?
Wow. To be a disciple and to I don't know, I'm no example, but in the little part to play that people look up to older folks, sometimes if you're smart enough, even younger folks, but leaders, and sometimes in order to get their attention, I guess somebody has to do some unusual things, and maybe that's what I was supposed to do, but I don't want to say like David and the Goliath, but certainly David had the strength of God behind him to handle that situation, and goodness sakes, I was given an awfully good chance to die, and I just did what I felt my purpose and training was for, and I think I was probably God-driven and protected, and I'm certainly not that good. I haven't said that before, but that's it. I really feel blessed.
Joe Foss, recipient of the Congressional Medal of Honor, and someone who distinguished himself way beyond his World War II cockpit, had a saying regarding recognition. It ain't bragging if you done it, but just 'cause you done it doesn't mean you go around bragging. Well, today, nearly 70 years later, Royce Williams is finally getting the recognition he deserves. Not just for the story of 7 versus 1, but for the reality that service and excellence are heroic in and of themselves.